The US empire is falling militarily for the same reason that the Roman Empire fell.
Men who don't understand that patriarchy is a system and not a gender are as ignorant as white feminists, as are class reductionists. I'll explain all this in this video, stitching this video because I left a comment on it that says, wow, it's almost like patriarchy doesn't work. While that comment probably has 1,000 likes by now, there are also a lot of very, very dumb comments missing the point. I don't respond to people who clearly don't use Google to answer their questions. I also am not a dom for free, and I think that's what a lot of men who are trolls are, just too broke for a dom. This is for anybody who's interested in class, race, and gender intersections. For context, I'm Dr. Anna Kalschmidt. I'm an industrial organizational psychologist that specializes in social class and its role at work. I just wrote a book on the unwritten rules of work for the working class and neurodivergence. I look at all the ways that class impacts class mobility, including the invisible ones. So let's talk about why I said it's almost like patriarchy doesn't work. And for, again, reiteration, the previous creator I think was a great video. I recommend watching it. This is not about them. First, I never said anything against men. So men getting offended in the comments, being like, oh, go start a matriarchy then, leave, but you can't use any men's inventions. Oh, because Nancy Pelosi is such a great matriarch. I never said anything about men. Patriarchy is a system, not a gender. It is a system that is based on domination, and it says men are worthy of dominating and women and anybody else have to submit to it. It is brethren with white supremacy and classism, which also talk about domination and forced domination of one group over another, but for different reasons. These systems work together to keep power hoarded. They also work together and are so impactful because since different groups are asserting different forms of domination over other people, it makes it harder to overthrow. Some have termed this the hierarchy. Look at all of these identities and how they can interact because you are less likely to overthrow a system. You, for example, as a white woman, have one that is privileged and one that is marginalized. This is intentional. If it was only about classism, if it was only about money, if it was only about patriarchy, if it was only about one thing, it would be too easily overthrown. And I've made several other videos that I'll put in this playlist, the unpopular class history, about why in America this has specifically been about race. But the men in these comments don't get it. They're instantly defensive. Notice I didn't even say matriarchy. They're bringing it up. They're like, oh, Nancy Pelosi, a great matriarch. Yeah, that's going well. Nancy Pelosi is a woman in a position of power in a patriarchal system, a system that still asserts dominance over another gender. She has to deal with things as a woman in power in a patriarchy that men don't, like all the critiques of her appearance, but she is not a matriarch. That does nothing to talk about my comment. Some have said maybe we need to use another term besides patriarchy because men get so triggered and defend it even though it's a system that hurts them and exploits them too unless they're in like the top 2%. So men defend their own harmful system, which is exactly what the Epstein class wants. Especially in the United States where we have we're all want to be billionaires one day, we're all just waiting on our ship to sail in, they all think it's going to be them too. So they're like, yeah, I'll go with it now because I'm going to be the billionaire one day. There's the classism intersection. Women can absolutely support patriarchy, and women of my complexion in the United States often do. Why? Because of white supremacy intersecting. We are choosing which system we have power in over the one, trying to do it over the one that oppresses us, which is part of why it does not get resolved. Nancy Pelosi is no exception here. I'm reading this book right now, Women's History of the Modern World. I like that it gives examples of women who have been not included in the major history books, including women who have supported fascism. For example, it talks about Eva Perón from Argentina, who also helped Yazidis escape Germany and harbor in Argentina. So it's not about gender as a person. It's about a system. It uses gender to hoard power. Similarly, you'll also find in this book, there's one of the first comments that I received on my comment was, okay, well, why don't you women just leave, but you can't take any of men's inventions? No problem. As this book and many others will tell you, women have invented a lot or discovered a lot. It just hasn't been recognized to us, or we weren't paid as much for it in many cases. If women were to leave and take all of our inventions, that would include computer programming as well as discovery of the DNA molecule, just to name two, but it would actually also include every human on the planet unless they were birthed by a trans man. So I don't think that's going to work for y'all. It's not the threat you think it is. Also, for all the we'll leave then, we're trying. That's the 4B movement, and that's why a lot of y'all aren't getting laid, and there's this whole red pill incel rise and rise of male virgins and trans maxing. So nobody's stopping us. Would say you're stopping us, but you sure are whining about it and try to roll back some rights over it. I'll put a link in the video to this book where you can purchase this book at a Black and woman-owned store. A small commission will go to me. Will also go to supporting an independent Black woman-owned store. TikTok doesn't let you comment links because whatever, so that will be at the link in my bio for my bookshop. For the class reductionists, I am a social class researcher. I've openly critiqued capitalism for a long time. I answer questions like this: can a business ethically exist under capitalism? I'm not a capitalism stan. I'm also not a Marxist, and I'll explain why. First, can we acknowledge that someone commenting, so this came up because someone commented that my comment on patriarchy sounded like people who don't understand what communism is. So it's bringing up another system. So it's like they almost understand how these intersect, but not quite. Also trying to move goalposts. I would say maybe if someone has doctor in their name, you should check out their page before you start accusing them of things, because I am a class researcher. But I don't think intellectualism is on your side if you're making these arguments, not necessarily about communism, but of not understanding what patriarchy is. So I digress. Capitalism has never served women, and neither has communism. Another thing I like about this book is that it outlines this very clearly, that while modern revolutions, it starts with the French Revolution, have always required women, capitalist or communist, they have never delivered the equal rights they promise women. Communists do a better job of saying they will, but they have not. And this is where the class reductionism loses its point, that you cannot have equality if it is only for some. The key part that people don't know about Marx is Marx was a German man in the 1800s. His ideas not directly translate to other places like the United States that built their class system on race, and several other countries, a lot of which are settler colonial states, Canada, Australia, etc., apartheid. To ignore that entirely is not going to solve the issue. Now, I agree that all of these, patriarchy, white supremacy, etc., ableism, are to enforce and keep the class system in place. Because again, if we were all on the same side, we would outnumber the elites. There's no way they could stay in power. But when we take these personally, as, oh, you just don't like men, that stops the progress from being made. And the people who designed these systems knew this. I don't care if you've read Karl Marx once and he's your hero. You are allowed to have heroes without thinking they're perfect. If your heroes require to be perfect, you will have no heroes. And that's fine too. But a lot of communist systems have been run by and for men. And you can say, well, that's not true communism then. Great. You would have to have gender-aware, non-patriarchal communism to have that happen. And it hasn't yet. Post-colonization, matriarchal societies have existed. And some still do. They're just in much smaller areas. Another thing I like about this book that it points out about Germany is part of why the Nazis lost the war is they were also... Another thing I like about this book is that it talks about how the Nazis, part of why they lost is they didn't include women. The Allies, including Russia, UK, and the States, relied on women to keep the factories running, even some with closer military roles. Germans did not, because of patriarchal thinking and systems. And that's part of why they could not sustain their fight. Again, when women have been part of the revolution, we just haven't been rewarded. And what did Stalin do after winning World War II? East Berlin. Did that go well? No. And you could say it wasn't pure Marxism, but he sure thought it was. And a lot of y'all on here in class reductionism are in the same vein of thinking. Conclude, ignoring how a system impacts people differently is wildly ignorant, and it is the point. It is intentional, and it is to keep the same system in place. Stop taking it personally and read a fucking book. I just gave you a pretty strong recommendation, but there are others. I forgot to mention, capitalism is pretty new. It's informed by patriarchy. In the US and in other settler colonial states, a lot of it's informed by white supremacy too. Capitalism is an economic system. It is influenced by the culture you're in, and it influences the culture you're in. It is exploitative. It's all about dominance. That's why these ideas behind patriarchy, white supremacy, classism are all connected. So when you say stupid shit, like, it's not patriarchy or classism or white supremacy. It's capitalism. You are missing the tools that keep capitalism in place and what inspired it in the first place.